Hello everyone. Welcome to another live stream session with Project Control Academy. Today we have a very important and exciting topic that I cannot wait to explore with my fantastic honored guest. Today we are going to talk about construction project controls. Yes, construction project controls. So does project control has a different impact and importance in construction projects? What do you think? Share in the chat. As you know, like construction industry inherently is quite complex, right? And especially in recent years with the COVID impact and the mounting number of projects not being able to finish on time and on budget, the importance of project controls in construction has been highlighted even further. But the question is, do we need to have a dedicated team of project controls at site to support the complexity of construction projects? If we do, when do we need to onboard the team at construction site? Do we, how can we select the right team at construction sites? And how we can best assemble a team that really can interact with the construction crew to give us an update or the right update of the construction execution projects and many more topics that we are about to discover today. But before diving in, first of all, go ahead in the chat and introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, from which country you are tuning in, and whether or not you have been involved in construction projects, primarily at the field or at site. So please go ahead and share your experience, and let's see who is here in the house today. I just see Shadi now leaving her comments. So welcome, Shadi. Thanks for joining us. I see also Fabio from Peru joining us. Thank you, Fabio. So welcome everyone. Please go ahead and have the engagement going on, because again, these sessions are for you to add value to you. And our fantastic guest is really a busy project professional, but sparing time from his busy schedule to be here with you today and share his expertise. So don't miss that out. I also see Tololop, if I'm saying your name right, from Canada. Thanks for joining us. So please, again, share in the chat your experience with construction projects and whether or not you have any experience working at site. Also, we want to know that. I see here, oh, from Katy. We are from Katy, Texas too, Jerry. So we are neighbors. Thanks for joining us. 40 years of experience in project controls. Fantastic. Very glad to have you joining us here. I see now Hadi from Kuwait joining us. We also have from Qatar. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you, from Oman, from Saudi. Wow, that's amazing, like how global the audience is. Thank you so much, everyone. So we have a lot to cover for today's session, and it's going to be quite informative. It's a topic we have not tapped into so far in our weekly or monthly sessions, so you're going to learn a ton. And talking about construction project controls, again, whether or not you have experience at site, this session is going to provide you a lot of great insights into construction project controls. We talk about challenges, the opportunities, and cover a lot of topics around construction project controls. And my honored guest today is coming from the construction industry himself. Actually, he started his journey in his career from the construction side, and now he's serving as the Senior Director of Project Controls for U.S. Field Services at Worley, and he brings over 30 years of engineering and construction project control experience at major EPC firms. So please help me give a big, warm virtual welcome to Mr. Tim Burroway to start this session with you all. So Tim, thank you so much for joining us in this discussion. It's truly an honor to have you here. So before we get started, could you just give us a bit more information about yourself and your experience in construction project controls?
Sure thing. Thanks, Shohreh. I appreciate it. Happy to be here. I hope this session's engaging and we get some good interaction. Yeah, my history started 30 plus years ago with Brown and Root Construction back in 1989. And so most people may know Brown and Root eventually became KBR. And since then, I've worked with Jacobs and now Worley through an acquisition. So have done construction project controls as well as the EPC lifecycle project controls as well, and always closely connected with estimating and all of that. So yeah, pretty passionate about it. My old history and even what we do today is a lot of direct hire, self-perform construction execution. So I think that may be interesting for some. But we also do construction management where we're doing the contracts management and subcontracts as well. So we customize all of our project controls plans to those execution strategies. And I find that, construction project controls has the greatest level of detail in our project control space. So engineering, is typically chasing services and progress of the engineering activities themselves, and of course procurement. But construction gets into the details and tends to get a lot more complicated. So, but yeah, happy to be here and get this kicked off.
Fantastic. So you just addressed one of the first challenges I wanted to ask you, Tim, about, construction is more challenging. So how about project controls in construction projects? Is it more challenging or not? Can you give us some insight for those who are working on home office versus those who are experiencing project controls at site? What's the differences and what are the challenges?
Sure. Yeah, I think the differences are mainly the level of detail that's required for construction controls. That goes all the way from the estimate and the level of detail that you're beginning with, and then you load your systems. From a cost perspective, our control accounts in construction are typically very finite. We have to get down into the indirect costs and the costs of temporary facilities and the costs of sanitary services and survey services, all the way through the staffing down to a very detailed level of staffing, which that probably is the most like engineering project controls is on the staff side. But when you get into the construction craft activities and the costs and the progress and the schedule of those activities, I think that's really where the difference comes into play for construction. We track a very granular level of progress. For instance, in our business, we track, we don't just track piping, for example. We track piping down to the metallurgy, to the size. From an EVM perspective, you've got to apply the right unit rates for earnings. So you don't earn at an all-in rate, you earn at the appropriate rate for the details. So on the progress measurement side, it is probably the lowest level of detail that we deal with. And that goes all the way down into our takeoffs. And when the IFC drawings are complete, we have a really robust program for tracking that progress. And then we track our performance against that progress as well. But all of those get closely coupled, or I say all the project controls disciplines have to be closely coupled, from the progress measurement component to the schedule component and to the cost component. So that's one of the keys, is making sure there's no gaps and no disconnects in project controls in the field. A lot of times we find that communication gets in the way, or lack of communication, I would say, gets in the way. So I think that's the biggest difference. Is it a challenge? It's kind of our standard operating model. So it is challenging because we're not always able to take resources that maybe have only dealt with engineering and procurement phases of projects and make them suitable for construction. So getting the people that can analyze and handle that level of detail is sometimes the challenge.
So do you need skilled project control professionals to be able to work at site? What is the entry point for someone who wants to gain the site experience and have that ground up? Because I believe starting in project controls at the field is the right way of getting that started. First of all, what is your opinion on that? Because you're coming from the construction side, is that the right approach? And if it is, for those who are starting or interested also to gain some site experience, what would be the starting point for them?
So I personally think that construction is the best place to enter into project controls. It can be tricky because depending on the size of the job, there may not be a full, robust staff of project controls professionals. So we're not always able to bring in entry level type people. Um, I think when you ask, how can you get in? I've recruited a lot over the years, and quite honestly, I don't think there's a particular degree program or even a particular construction skill program that lends itself to being more amenable to project controls than another. So when I say that, I say, we've hired engineers, chemical engineers and civil engineers, but we've also hired from within and gotten people out of the craft that may have been started as pipe helpers and pipe fitters, welders, supervisors. They have the greatest connection to the construction tasks and to the way construction actually works in the field. So sometimes that's a huge benefit to us. And typically it's only training them up in the systems that we control the cost and the schedule and progress with, because generally they have those skill sets. So, new hire grads, college grads, it's not a requirement. But we certainly look for those people that have a well-rounded background. And I think one of the biggest things to look at or look for in construction project controls personnel, probably even more so than engineering and procurement, is their ability to work with people and their people skills. Because, and I think we'll probably touch on it here in a little bit, but that team environment and the connectivity is key to the success of the projects and the project controls efforts. So I think people skills is big, technical skills is important, but in project controls, I think we can develop those skills over time, I think.
So very good point, Tim. So you mentioned even some of your best staff was those from the construction side who know the ins and out of the process, and you kind of drag them into project controls. But how did you train them to do proper planning, to do proper progressing, cost measurement? So can you also shed more lights on that as well? Like how the training works for those people? Can they get up and running? All they need is just knowing the processes, or did you face any challenges on that, or no, it was an easy transition?
Well, I wouldn't say it's easy. It's definitely not easy to. It's easy to train people on systems. I think everybody would probably agree with that. Being able to train them in the softer side of what actually goes into and being able to trend and analyze data. Specifically in the scheduling space, I think the best training we do is assigning the new hires or the newer employees to mentors that understand the process, but they understand the system, but they understand exactly what they're doing. So from a planning and scheduling standpoint, it's to start with the basics and building an activity list, and then working with senior schedulers or really construction management folks to start to assemble a schedule that starts with detailed activities. Then you start to put the logic in there to tie the activities together. You start to put the durations to it. You start to put the resources to it. And I think that's how they learn and they grow, is by learning from others that have already done it or are doing it. And I think that's the biggest part. Probably a lot in the same in the EVM space, the progress measurement space. I mean, we can have people take off drawings, for example, but till they see it installed in the field and they understand that there's a milestone basis to how that gets installed and how they earn progress. A lot of it's hands-on, and it's working with those CM teams and working with the construction project controls professionals to get that learning and that knowledge. It's kind of I guess it's a mix. There's the system side of it, and then there's the side of understanding the work that you're dealing with.
Fantastic. Also, you mentioned one of the characteristics or the things that the site staff need to have. I mean, the project control team is good communication and good attitude, of course, as you said, which I believe should be something that all of us in project controls need to have because we deal with a lot of people. We are just the facilitator of the information. We are not owning anything. So, how about at site team? How is different at site, and who are our stakeholders for project controls? Is it the site crew? How do the team get the right information from them? Because again, the staff, the crew might not be that much knowledgeable on when you go and ask about something specific related to the project. So how do you make sure that the team at the field get the right information from the right people?
Yeah, so the team in the field, they really have to deal with a large variety of people at the project level. And when I say that, when we do direct hire construction, I mean, you're talking from the labor crew up through the skilled craft crews and all the way to construction managers and directors and the like. So it's that ability to work with that entire group of people, basically from top to bottom. I think that's the key. I didn't mention earlier, I forgot to mention, but actually my degree is in psychology. And I've kind of always said in my career that I'm still working on the world's largest case study because construction is probably the best area to do that. But it's always a joke. But I think the success goes down to being able to talk with and work with the people that are the boots on the ground. They're actually making the construction activities happen. And then also being able to assemble the data in the reporting to get up to the executive levels. You know, it may be the project manager or construction manager on the site, but then there's leadership levels above that. And so you have to be able to customize and cater that data and that reporting to your audience. So I think it's imperative on the construction project controls professionals in the field to be able to work with that entire population of people that are supporting that construction project from, if you want to call it top to bottom or, whatever level. I think that's key.
Wow. So it's even more challenging at construction. I didn't know even communication is more important at construction site. So that's amazing. Thanks for clarifying that, Tim. So how about let's say we have, you mentioned also at the beginning, those who are also working at site and know the process and everything would be the best fit for construction project control. So let's say someone from another industry, let's say pulp and paper, wants to move to oil and gas, for example, has been at site but doesn't have experience in this industry. So would you give that person an opportunity or not? So my question is primarily on the transition from another industry to the new industry. Do they need to start from site or field experience to gain that industry knowledge before moving to the home office? What are your insights on transitioning to another industry? Because many are now considering that depending on the economy and stuff, but how they can make the right transition to the right industry and how they can grow.
Yeah, I don't think for project controls that it's extremely difficult to transition from sector to sector. I think the basics of project controls are generally speaking the same. I think where you probably see the most opportunity to gain more knowledge is, as you mentioned, you might, let's say if you're a planner scheduler and you've been working in a pulp and paper industry and you're working with, the paper machines and the level of detail and the sequence of events. And then you go to oil and gas and you're building a chemical production facility or you're working in a refinery. I think there are some things that, you need to learn in the new industry, in the new sector. But I think because the processes and the way to build schedules, how to go about getting those details that you may need. Progress measurement, kind of the same thing. You need to be able to break down the bigger pieces into the widgets that are actually going to be assembled for any given project. I'll give you an example. We at Worley did a large scale solar project last year, And it was kind of our first, industrial size solar opportunity for direct hire construction. And it was definitely, even for us that have been in the business for 25 and 30 years, it was definitely a challenge because we hadn't done that before. But our project controls people, I mean, they did excellent. They were able to transition and understand, and it was having the ability to break down the new scope and the new schedule into manageable pieces that the construction workforce could execute. And then, of course, cost control and progress measurement and planning and scheduling all fell in place or in line with that. So I don't think the transition is probably as difficult as, like you're not going to, most likely if you're a mechanical engineer, you're not going to transition very well to being an electrical engineer. But I think in the project control space, you have a lot more opportunity to do that. And now that we're seeing a lot more alternative and new energy, we're starting to see different types of projects that are, we're constructing things that are different than we were used to in just the standard, I'll call it petrochem or oil and gas space, where we all got kind of comfortable. Now we have new projects to try to break down and understand. But I think from a controls perspective, it's still about breaking it down, being able to report against it, trend against it, and of course, keep management informed on everything we're doing.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tim. And the good thing about project control principles, they are, I believe, all universal. So it might take some time to get adjusted to the new industry and knowing the sequence of work and how the work is done. But as you said, if we know project controls, we can easily adapt to a new industry. But as an employer, as the senior project control director who is in charge of hiring as well, would you give that opportunity to someone who is not from your industry, Tim? Have you had that experience before, and how that person was up and running when the opportunity was given?
Yeah, most definitely. We've given those opportunities. I think the key is we wouldn't want to staff a project with all new people to an industry. That's where we get that knowledge share and that learning across generations that keep us moving forward. Yeah, I mean the best way to do it is to keep the pipeline full of entry level type people to keep fulfilling that, because in construction, what we find is, younger people are more mobile. They're able to go to remote projects and do that more. And the natural tendency is, once you've been in the business for a few years, being on the road might not be optimum for you. So we kind of have to keep the pipeline full of entry level people. And some work out and some don't. And some go into, say, a home office controls type environment, and some don't like the environment at all. So it's quite interesting. We in our controls resource group, our construction controls resource group, we have a lot of people that have been doing projects for a long time and traveling, and they still love to do that, but it's not for everybody. And you kind of have to make that decision. In previous years, we've actually done our new grad hires, and one of the caveats, or one of the criteria is, hey, when you come on board, you're most likely going to be assigned to a construction project, and it's most likely not going to be in Houston, Texas. So we try to just be honest and open up front and say, hey, if that's something you're interested in, and you get to see a lot of the country. It may not always be the glamorous part of the country, but you'll see different parts of the country. You'll learn a lot, and you can take that experience with you, and hopefully we can grow you into where, a lot of these people like to get into construction management and into project management. So there's some growth opportunities there, not just in project controls, but outside of the project control space as well. So yeah, it's a mix. I mean, it's when you assemble these teams, that's a big factor, is putting the right team together to be successful.
And I remember back then when I was also working at Worley, I wanted to have a site experience, and I had to sign an agreement that I will be staying at site at the refinery basically for at least 3 years. So perhaps it was because of the difficulties of the going back and forth and the difficulty of the working environment. I'm not sure. How about you? Like, is there any requirement like that for people who are working at site, such an agreement that if you're transitioning, let's say, from home office to site, or you're starting off at site, there is a minimum number of years that you need to stay there, or no, you're just open to any time that the person wants to go out and perhaps move to the home office?
Yeah, we haven't signed any term agreements that dictate. I mean, obviously, when somebody agrees to do it, and when we ask them to do it, it's expected to be for the life of the project. There's those cases that personal situations arise, or maybe it's not the right opportunity. But I think we treat our traveling resources very well. Typically, the assignment conditions, provide trips home monthly, and they provide per diem to pay for their expenses while they're away from their homes, their apartments or homes. So I think that keeps it manageable. But no, we haven't had any. At least we at Worley haven't done any term agreements where we really need you to sign an agreement that says, you'll be there for X duration or for the project duration. It's just kind of understood, I guess.
And just out of curiosity, Tim, what's the retention period for those who are working at site? I'm sure some are loving the site experience, but some are going there to just gain the experience, to have the great foundation and come back for an easy route, perhaps working at home office and close to home, so not having that much travel. But can you give us some insight in terms of the retention, or how long a person would usually stay at site, considering the difficulties of the site and the traveling and all the other things with it?
Yeah, I mean, we experience, I would say, a little bit of turnover from the site teams, but generally, it's unless there's a personal situation that arises. Generally, our site resources will commit to the project, and they'll stay for the life of the project. There are those cases where the project's complete, and they would prefer not to be, on another remote location. So in those situations, we try to find ways to find them an opportunity that's more home based, home office based, so that I mean, I think everybody would agree in today's day and age, looking out for the employee is absolutely the right thing to do, and it's what we should be doing. So if we find that it's not the right fit, or it's just not a long term opportunity, then we try to work with the employees and find them the right fit. I mean, that's the other tricky part about construction project controls in projects in general, is we're always working ourselves out of a job, right? Because projects are designed to start and finish. I like to tell people when we bring them into the group and we assign them that I don't consider you a project hire. I consider you a hire for projects. And so when the projects are completed, our 100% goal is to get them reassigned to another project, and hopefully it's the right fit for both the company and the employee. But no guarantees. I mean, COVID was extremely difficult, and not only in the world and just the market in general, but when projects weren't there, then the opportunities aren't there. So whereas we would normally like to roll resources from project to project to project, when we had a lack of projects, that didn't allow us to keep those resources. So fortunately, we've gotten a lot of them back. It feels like the industry is very robust right now, and I think that's across all engineering, procurement, and construction sectors right now. So that's been a benefit to try to keep everybody employed. And when the projects are done, we find a new project opportunity for you, and we get you assigned to it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, Tim. Before I go further with the list of questions I have for Tim, I would like to ask our fantastic audience here to have your questions coming. Again, these sessions are for you to get direct guidance from experts like Tim. So if you have any question about construction project controls or the growth opportunities or the entry field or anything that you would like to learn from an expert in the field, please have your questions coming so I will address them throughout the session. So another question for you, Tim, is the onboarding process. So when would be the right time for onboarding the team, let's say from the engineering procurement to the construction and construction management? Is there any board or any time that we need to do work on that onboarding? Can you shed more light on the onboarding process and the transition as well?
Sure. I think the best opportunity for early onboarding, and I'll call it the handoff from engineering and procurement to construction, or the transition, our most success is when we can bring the scheduling resources in as early as possible, and the construction management resources to work together on further detailing the construction schedule and make sure that it fits the execution plan and it fits the construction schedule, and that would be our first resource that is most beneficial to the transition. And then from there, the project controls managers and the cost controllers and the EVM specialists would be next. Typically, we're looking for, depending on the size of the project and complexity, typically we're looking for 2 to 3 months before they're ready to mobilize to the field. That would give them ample time to basically digest the estimate, to recast the estimate into the cost control systems and into the progress measurement systems, make sure the schedule's resource loaded, to match the estimate so that we've got the right work hour basis. So that, 2 to 3 months, I think, is the right timeline. And it can be earlier on larger scale projects, because a lot of the project controls people can be valuable to the constructability phase and the development of construction work packaging and the setting up the WBSs and the CBSs. One of the things we found lately is, even if we can't get all of those construction resources mobilized early, before engineering and procurement is complete, it is very important that we get in and work with the home office team to establish the WBS and the CBS that's going to drive the project. Because if you don't do that early enough, it's hard to create that later and make that a viable option. It really needs to be driven up into the engineering and procurement phase so that it's a seamless transition from engineering and procurement to construction.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for the details shared. I remember in our earlier conversation, you mentioned, Tim, progress is king, and I'm now hearing you and throughout this conversation that really progressing is important more than ever at construction project control. So can you give us more information about how the team does the right progressing? Is this the EVM that's really driving this, or if you just give us more information on the progress and how it's been done effectively, so that we make sure that the progress and performance of construction sites are reported accurately.
Yeah, so if there's anybody listening that knows me, when they hear progress is king, they probably cringe, because I say it all the time. But I really think that, if you get back to basics on construction project controls, you have to establish a progress plan that's realistic and achievable for the project. And that goes, from building the schedule and resource loading the schedule and making sure that you have all the ties correct, and that it's a realistic and achievable set of milestones, to work the construction schedule. So I when you go back to EVM and construction, I think it's the hub of project controls, and it should be the hub of project management. That, if you're making your progress gains and you're making your monthly, weekly, and to date gains against your plan, you're going to be successful just by default. Now, there's all kinds of elements that go into that. Is it taking us more hours to make the progress, which is costing us more? Is it taking more shifting and things like that? But if you can maintain that progress plan, your project controls and your projects are much more successful. So I think that's why I'm so passionate about the progress curve and saying that progress is king, because if you can do everything to stay on your progress plan, everything else comes together. It's when we get off of that plan and everybody's going through it where you're having to re-baseline the schedule every couple of months because you can't make the progress. And there's variables that affect that. It could be maybe the progress gains weren't realistic to start with. I think you and I had touched on it. A lot of that's driven by client expectations, and some would prefer to target a somewhat unrealistic date to guarantee that they can get the best date possible. I'm not a big fan of that. I think we should set realistic expectations first and then manage to those, and then you can set your mitigation strategies against those if you fall behind plan. So, there's a lot of variables between clients and owner or company leadership and even site leadership. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. But if you give me a progress curve and a resource curve, and you give me a robust EVM system that can track that actual earned value progress using milestone rules of credit, I don't think it's difficult. Now you get off plan, that's where it gets a lot trickier.
Yeah, especially with the level of detail that you're managing projects at construction, I think EVM would be more accurate, of course. But perhaps one question that just came to my mind is the actual cost when you are just into EVM, and I think actual cost would be a challenge for construction projects. Can you give us more information on how you make sure that you capture the right actual cost in your reporting? Because again, many of those metrics in EVM depends on the actual cost as well. So how to make sure you get the right information or the timely actual cost?
Yeah, our systems are very well connected, especially we do direct hire self-perform construction. Our craft time is entered daily, and then then we get those reports weekly, and that real-time cost data is uploaded into our accounting system. So we're within a week. Previous week's actual costs are in our system early the next week. So I think we're pretty well connected there. So that tells us our actual expenditures, and then on a weekly basis we compare back to our earned values, and that gives us our performance measurement. And really that happens regardless of contract style. It's whether it's a lump sum contract or a client reimbursable T&M contract. When we do our self-perform, that part of it's pretty easy. I think the more difficult part of actual costs is making sure that you get your commitments in from your procurement systems and your subcontract systems. And even beyond that, even if you have your commitments in, the actuals tend to trail much further behind. And I think that's one of the challenges for our cost controllers, is to anticipate those actual charges and make sure that we've got them committed and forecasted into our EACs.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the detailed information on that. I appreciate you, Tim. So I'm also curious to know about the size of the construction project control. So is this a small team of project control team that needs to be, of course, it depends on the project size, but can you shed more light on the size of the team that's needed for the construction project, and how many team members you need to assemble to make sure that we have the right project performance and status reporting done at the right time?
I think the way you start to think about that is, well, what are the elements of project controls for a construction project that have to be covered? So you've got your cost and your change management, you've got your planning and your scheduling, you've got your earned value, and which is progress measurement and performance, depending on the contract. So I think you start with that, and then you let the size of the project dictate how many resources that takes. So I think for us, oftentimes, a small project people would think it's simple. You should still only have one project controls resource, but in our industry and in our current state, we don't have a lot of dual-hatted or multi-hatted people that can take care of that. So, for instance, we might not have a single resource that can handle planning and scheduling and cost and change management and progress measurement. So, I think the size of the team to me ranges from somewhere from 2, and then of course I'm sure there's people on the call that have had mega projects, and there's 20 or 30 and maybe even more project controllers for mega projects. But for me, I like to think that the sweet zone for project controls is to have a dedicated project controls lead or manager with a cost specialist, a planner scheduler, and an EVM specialist. So kind of a 4-person team is where I think the sweet spot is for most projects. Like I said, it depends on the complexity of the project. It also depends on the dollar value of the project. But I think it's a challenge both with our clients, internal and external, sometimes that they think, well, this job's only $3 million, and this $100 million job has 3 people, so I should only need 1 person for the $3 million job. And there's still those elements. There's a lot of tracking that has to be managed, even on the smallest of projects.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, thank you for that, Tim. We have a question by Alexander, and the question is how project controls could contribute to mitigate construction issues, and how you're already part of that workflow.
Okay, digest that for a second. So, to mitigate constructability issues, I think it's going to be the early identification of issues is going to be the starting point. So if we've gotten a project and all the design's complete and the IFCs are complete, and then we start to run into issues, so it's getting that early identification of those issues, getting it into your change management process, so the resolutions can be reviewed and agreed to both with client and company. I think that probably is the biggest thing. If we go upstream of that and we talk constructability, say during the design phase and through the end of design, that's really where our construction management groups and our advanced work phase planning groups bring the most benefit, is because they're in the front end of those projects trying to foresee what that construction execution is going to look like and what the best efficient methods are. And so they'll drive that back into the engineering phase. But for the field controls space, it's the early identification of issues, tracking those issues, bringing them to management, and then letting them know the status of those issues.
Fantastic. And I think at construction, it would be much easier and faster to detect the issues as compared to the home office. Don't you agree, Tim?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you go to put the pipe spools up and they don't fit, you pretty much know you've got a problem right there. So, but there's opportunities in construction to get ahead of that too, with some early planning and identification and doing the checks and balances ahead of the crew actually getting out there with the material and then having a problem. So there's some things we can do there from a constructability standpoint to try to mitigate some of those.
Okay, great. We have a question by Alan, and the question is now popping up here. Companies seems to be seeking to fill planning, scheduling, project control positions. I've used to these being 3 separate skill sets. Are companies wanting this broad diversity in the new hire, meaning that they need to have skill sets on different fields of project controls, not just one?
I would say they are definitely, that is their preference. They would like to have new hires, and we get it all the time from clients. Well, I don't want to hire a cost and a planning and scheduling resource. I want to hire one person to do it all. And we struggle to fill those roles. We do find a few people that can do that. We have had some success in our new hires, making them or giving them that skill from the beginning. So they may spend a period of time in planning and scheduling. They may spend a period of time in cost and change management, and maybe progress measurement and estimating would probably be another one. It's kind of, 4 disciplines there. And So that's worked out pretty good because we've been able to grow and develop a few people that can go and do those one person projects, that don't have maybe a budget, or maybe the complexity of the project doesn't dictate it, so they can actually handle doing more than one. But I think as the resources get older, you kind of migrate towards one or the other, and you kind of become more proficient and skilled in one, and that makes it harder to cross. We were talking about the transition from sectors earlier. I think sometimes the transition from discipline within project controls to another discipline is probably one of our biggest hurdles.
Exactly. And to add to what you said, Tim, actually, I'm also really a fan of diversifying our skill sets in project controls. I believe that's the way to grow. And I would like to ask Alan to check the article and video I had on that on T-shaped project professionals, project controls professionals. You can go to Project Control Academy and check the blog so you can find that out. So to see the importance of it, I think more than ever, now we need to diversify our skill sets in different fields of project controls. Not just companies are seeking, as Tim mentioned, but also for our own growth and future leveraging the technologies. We need to really be diversifying our skill sets. So I highly recommend everyone to consider that. So talking about that, Tim, so what are the growth opportunities? Now we just talked about the skill sets and the hiring. So for those primarily on construction project controls, what are the growth opportunities or in project controls general? So can you shed more light on the growth opportunities for construction project controls?
Yeah, I think the growth opportunities are tremendous. I think it depends on the individual and what they're looking for. I think first and foremost is to grow in your discipline within project controls. If you come into progress measurement or cost control, there's lots of opportunities to grow from associate to analyst 1, analyst 2, and all that. And then if you stay in project controls, the growth opportunities are generally speaking going to be up through project controls management or into project controls management. We actually have had some really good success on some project controls resources being interested in construction management. So they take their project controls background, because I think in project controls, you get to touch all aspects of the project. So that's a good entry level for them to get into construction management, where they're actually supervising the work in the field, but they also understand the back end of how all that works. Whereas sometimes, we'll take a superintendent, for example. Superintendent may not have been exposed to all of the aspects of a project. So when they get elevated into a construction management role, they might be missing some of those tools. Whereas project controls has touched on the accounting and the finance and the cost control and the planning, the scheduling, the resource management, all the way through HR and administration, because we interface with everybody. That's what I love about project controls is that you get to touch all elements of the project. You may not be responsible for all elements, but you touch all elements and you collaborate with. So I think that's the big thing. So growth potential, it depends on the individual. If they are destined to be project controls. I mean, I'll be honest, when I started in project controls, did I have a vision that said I want to be a project controls manager and a construction manager and a director? No, I didn't have that vision back there. But once I got a taste of project controls, I liked all the aspects and the elements of it, and it just was kind of a natural progression for me. When I came up in the 90s, we didn't tend to call them project controls managers as much as we call them technical services managers. So we actually touched a little bit in the field engineering space and the subcontract management space, document control oversight, these type parts of the project that are not necessarily always intuitive to project controls. So I think it's kind of the sky's the limit when, it's a very, I tell people all the time, I think project controls is a very niche market. And it's not something you specifically typically go to school for or take classes or read on to become experienced in. You kind of get into it, and then the project experience is where you grow.
Okay, great. So now talking about you climbing the ladder as the now Senior Director of Project Controls at Worley. So can you share some secrets of your success with us and the audience? How, if someone is just starting or in the middle of this journey, how they can be you or get to the point you are in the corporate ladder?
I think being patient is part of it. I think our younger generation folks are probably going to struggle with that more than those of us that have been in the business for a while. But I think that was the key for me, was to take projects one by one and seize the opportunity, the opportunities that were put in front of me. Taking on challenging assignments is probably one of the best things that helped me. I'm not so sure if I took them or if they were given to me, but I cherish them now. Working through a troubled project or doing several of those are great for growth, and it'll kind of let you know if you're destined for this business, and once you do some of those, I think that's key. Taking on bigger and better projects. I mean, I think looking for things that are outside of your work scope is often valuable. I don't think you should do it at the expense of sacrificing what you're expected to do. But I think collaborating with those around you and understanding more and working more with senior leadership is probably what got me kind of started on that momentum trail. So I had some good success on getting put into those challenging positions, and then it just kind of started, happening that I was asked to take on more responsibilities and take on more leadership roles. And I haven't worked for a tremendous amount of companies, so I tend to stay within that company and try to work within the boundaries and take the opportunities that are available.
And that's exactly the same message I heard from the VPs, from the top level management when I had the honor of talking to them. They all said the same thing like you, Tim, just grabbing the challenging opportunities and welcome the challenge, go through the challenge. That's how you grow. So many of us are just prefer to stay in our comfort zone and just do the repeated work and don't challenge ourselves. But I believe the growth is lying in the challenging roles and the projects that we get ourselves into. So congratulations on that, team. And that's a very insightful message that I want everyone to go home with. So thank you for sharing on that. So we have one technical question and we have some time. Is that okay if we just deviate a bit and ask the technical question from our audience?
Sure.
So,
Sure. Sorry, I was going to say one more thing. I think what we find today is with our younger hires and those that are just getting in the business, it's not just taking on new challenges, but for us, we all grew up in a world where we had to do more and to take a little bit extra time and put in a little bit of extra time. So I think that's one of the things we struggle with today is, I know the days of working 60, 70, 80 hours a week for, standard salary paychecks are not there. But it does require some commitment and some willingness to go over and beyond maybe what is typically expected. So I guess I would throw that out there too.
and I like to say that there is no traffic in the extra mile. So when you just go the extra mile, you're just the one at the top. So you're a prime example of that, Tim. And just now that we just talked about it, it came to my mind, in addition to welcoming the challenge, and yes, we need to sacrifice some time to be able to do that. Is there any leadership advice that you have? Is it just, I know you mentioned communication is very important, which of course you're a great communicator as a leader, but in terms of leadership to go up the corporate ladder, do we need also to gain some leadership skills, or it come by experience?
I think most of it comes by experience, but I would say tying that back to that communication. I mean, communication to me is probably the single most important element of project success. And that's at all phases of the project and all elements of the project. So being able to communicate, and I'll say communicate upwards and downwards is key. And I think that in itself is a leadership quality. And once you figure that out, that the more you communicate with people and the more that you get them to communicate with you, then the project's going to be successful, and that is going to make everybody successful. So I think communication is key. It's kind of like progress is king and communication is the key. So
I like that. Progress is king and communication is key. That's a nice quote, Tim. Thank you. So how about let's say you have a team player who is not performing well or who is not committed to the work, or how do you deal with that as a leader? Do you give that person a lot of opportunities, or how do you make that person to commit to the job? If you had any experience on that, on an unproductive teamwork or team player.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think the first thing to do is to evaluate is the person competent and capable of doing the task that you have assigned. We touched on it earlier in the session, but putting the right team together is very critical. And I've seen situations where there might be one person in the team that doesn't fit in the team, but we work with those people. First thing would be to see if they can work with the team, but beyond that, it may not be that person's not capable of doing the task. It may just not be a good fit for that particular team. So what we would try to do is swap that person out, make a change, and then give them another opportunity. And I've seen situations where that person might go and shine with the second team, but the first team they could not get along with. And I think that happens in a variety of ways. I mean, it happens in client teams, in our resources working with client teams. So we've had to make changes there. Didn't mean that the person wasn't competent and capable. We just had to switch the team. So we do play a little bit of that chess game, and we move the pieces around as we need to. And then I've had those situations where the skills and competencies are probably there for a particular individual, but they're just not able to work with anybody. So, we've had to make those hard decisions too. But to me, that's, you're not in the right business because you have to be able to work. We're a people business, and that's the way we're going to be successful. So I think that's important, is, making sure that the people are competent and capable, and then they can work with the teams.
Okay, well said, Tim. So perhaps I would like to end this conversation by knowing your ideas on the trends in project control, especially in the construction industry, and considering the global economy recession that we are already in, and it's going to hit us more hard toward the end of this quarter. So what would be the job opportunities for project controls, especially in this time, in these difficult times? Do you think still it's going to be strong? Or would it be stronger in construction sites or as compared to the home office? If you just give us your opinion on the trends and where you see we will be heading in the future, considering the challenges with the COVID, post-COVID, and now the economy recession that is going to hit us hard. I hope not, but that's what I'm hearing over and over. So what are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring this up, because it feels like the industry and the business is on the verge of booming. I mean, there's a lot of proposal activity. There's a lot of project activity in many different sectors. Worley is very in tune with new energy and alternative energy and all of the new opportunities we have. But I think you're right. It's the economy's kind of telling us one thing, the industry's kind of telling us another. But I still feel like it's a good time to be in project controls and for more opportunities to develop and be available. We're certainly seeing that, and I don't know if that's just to our business or to the business in general. It feels like it's the business in general. But I mean, there's always that challenge that the economy can flip that situation on us really quick, and then all of a sudden we don't have those projects and those proposals that we were hoping for, or that we may have actually had, and maybe they slow them down, or they cancel them. So that's always the dilemma with project controls, going back to trying to hire somebody today for a project, and that's a great opportunity. And if something happens to that project, hopefully there's others, but there's no guarantees. So that trend and outlook is a little ominous, I think. Not quite sure where that's going to take us. And then, of course, just dealing with the economy. You and I had touched on it previously, and the supply chain issues and project controllers trying to be able to keep up with, the delays in getting material, which are causing construction delays, and the costs that are just all. I mean, it's you can see it in the gas prices too, but costs are just all over the map, going up and down every day. And so for our cost specialists to try to trend and forecast these jobs is getting pretty tricky because they can't predict, what's the supply chain going to look like over the next 6 months. Equipment costs, I'm talking rolling stock, rental equipment, services are, increasing. So I think that's one of the challenges facing our projects. And of course, that affects all of project controls, not just cost, but it affects the execution as well. So those are some big topics maybe for another day.
Yeah, indeed. Wow, that was a very insightful discussion. Thank you so very much, Tim, for giving us a lot of great insights into construction project controls. I hope it added value to everyone who joined us live or watching this on a replay later. So, but cannot thank you enough, Tim. I personally enjoyed this session quite a lot, and I hope everyone else did. But thank you so much. I hope we can have you in future conversation, but I really appreciate the time you spent in from your crazy busy schedule and to share your experience and insight with our global audience. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shohreh. It was a great session. And yeah, look forward to future conversations.
Thank you. And special big shout out to everyone who joined us live, was engaged in the conversation, asking so many great questions. Thanks, everyone. See you next week with another leader in project controls, talking about, again, we haven't finalized the topic, but perhaps new technologies in project controls. So stay tuned for next Thursday at 11 a.m. US Central Time, where we are going to have another insightful conversation. So with that, I would leave everyone to go back to their work or to their life. So hopefully we see you again next week. Thanks again, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.